All right, with that, I'm going to call the meeting officially to order. Anybody have anything, any agenda items they would like to add? Okay, so, Marty, I always say this, would you like to lead us into this?
Sure, I think.
So this is our agenda, and we'll go through some of this fairly quickly, because we don't have a lot of time, and we do have a lunch break. So, here we go.
Well, I think there's the way the agenda is structured, there's a couple of items that were placed on the agenda by the county board, and then we have several on there by the for the mayor and city council. The first item on the agenda was placed on there by the county board as a 2-mile radius. I guess we have a packet of information that we've talked about previously with the county board when we talked about the 2-mile radius, but I just want to, before we just jump into a presentation, if there is a specific question or an issue that has come up that we can try to address, we'll do that. Otherwise, I think Mike's got some handouts and we can talk a little bit about the history and the background. I just don't want to repeat things that maybe you guys have already heard before.
Because we'll repeat.
We will.
But if you've got
concerns,
if you want to lead us, that'd be great. Yeah.
Is about, the 2-mile thing doesn't exist anymore as 2 miles from the city limits. That's the concern that a lot of citizens have. Like in my territory, ends at the Carlos Township line. That's the end of the city limits now, and it doesn't extend 2 more miles.
Correct.
But there are areas where it is 2 miles. That confusion don't help. And if the city isn't going to do any more orderly annexation, why don't we just knock it in the head and get back to the borders? That's the request, or that's what a lot of the people in the county are asking.
Sure.
People that live in that buffer.
I can second that.
Yeah, that is the concern, but that is, the other thing is it's very confusing because it goes to the border there, and there's still areas where it does go 2 miles
Sure.
beyond.
Yep.
So.
Yep.
Because I know I represent
Yeah.
Lake Mary Township and Hudson Township, and I've had a lot of people, why do we have to get 2 building permits? One from the city, one from the county. Why can't we just go to the county and get a permit?
When you've been annexing, you have not been going out 2 miles past that?
Nope.
You never have?
Nope. The 2 mile, what we'll call the 2-mile radius for the code enforcement area is the same as it was in 1999. That's correct. Yep. Yep. So I have just a little information, Bobby. I'll just hand you a stack and you take one. There should be one in there for every elected official here. I've got one for you too, and Marty. There's nothing new in this particular handout. It's the history of the code enforcement area. I think the important piece is that the building code, and this is important for everybody to understand, the building code is statewide. That's a statewide law. It's the law in the city of Evansville. It's the law in the south half of Lake Mary Township. It's the law statewide. And it's not enforced everywhere. It's enforced within the city of Alexandria. And in 1999, the city extended its code enforcement authority to the greatest extent it could at the time, which was it couldn't go any further than 2 miles. And we typically didn't want to cut a parcel in half with a 2-mile radius, so we followed section lines and road lines, things like that, center lines of roads, to make those lines be as clear as possible. We have an excellent map of the code enforcement area. It's available online. It's available to anybody who wants to see it. So there, quite frankly, should be no confusion about where the 2-mile boundary is. It's a really good map. Anybody who wants to see it can find it online pretty fast. And so, if there's any confusion, it's simply that people haven't availed themselves of some of the necessary information. So, the history of the code enforcement area that I handed out goes back to when John Perino was the mayor of the city of Alexandria. He was very concerned about, ironically, we were talking about fires here the last hour with Fire Chief Jeff Terrell there, concerned about sending firefighters into substandard structures that were outside the city, because the city limits was the code enforcement area up until that time. He said, I'd like to make sure that we are sending our firefighters into the safest possible structures when they're going outside the city to fight a fire. And so how do we do that? And the answer was you do this to extend the code enforcement area. There has always been a little bit of confusion about the idea that the code enforcement area somehow conflated with annexation. The two have never been related to each other. The city firefighters fight fires outside the city, and we had another one on over the weekend. The house fire that occurred over the weekend was in LeGrand Township, right outside the city, but still in LeGrand Township, in the code enforcement area. So if that had been new construction since 1999, we would have known that that building was built according to the provisions of the state building code. So the mayor and council have discussed this at regular intervals, I'd say, since 1999, and there's never been any interest on the part of the mayor and council to withdraw from the code enforcement area because it provides a very valuable service. I don't know if you've all seen the photos. Oh, I got more handouts. We killed a lot of trees getting ready for this meeting, but probably a few might have those.
So, Madam Mayor, if I might just ask a question here to Mike. So does the access to city water have any effect on what you're talking about here?
Not in the code enforcement area, no. Yep. Think about sprinkler or something
Yes,
like that. No.
yep.
Section 1306 applies only within the city. Part of the handout that you're getting now should have some photos in it from some of the construction areas. Again, remember that the building code is statewide, so any designer, any architect, any engineer, any building contractor is supposed to build to those code provisions. And there's not, none of you would be willing to say that outside of the code enforcement area, that's always the case. You all can think of examples where construction has been done that was either not designed according to the building code or not executed according to the building code. And in any case, there were no inspections to verify that it was done according to the building code. Even in the code enforcement area, so that's an overlap of jurisdictions there. Dave Rush is here. Dave can talk about the land use permit piece of that. The county has the land use jurisdiction on all that land. So the county says, yes, you can build a commercial structure on this piece of ground in LeGrand Township. And then the city reviews the plan and does the inspections on the building that's going to be built in that code enforcement area. So that whoever the developer is or the owner of the property knows that their building is being built according to the building code. The building code does not look at landscaping. Building code does not look at the context of the neighborhood. The building code looks at that structure and what we'll call positive drainage 6 feet up.
Madam Mayor, just another question. How about agricultural buildings?
Ag buildings are specifically exempted from the provisions of the building code. So if you've got an ag barn, an ag building, we have ag buildings in the city that have been built, within the last half dozen years, exempted from getting a building permit, exempted from any inspections.
And so if I can add to this discussion, and Mike is right, it's been going on for a lot of years, and the city recognizes that it's an awkward process for somebody who doesn't really know where they live to say, what do you mean I have to go get another permit? And we have tried for a number of years. We even looked at having a joint place within the city or the county where we could do that, and all kinds of solutions to that problem. And the major solution, the easiest solution would be for the county to accept the state building code and abide by that. And we would not have to have the 2 permit.
According to the law, the county already abides by it, like Mr. Weber said. It's the law. We don't inspect.
Right.
The other confusion or the other problem with it that created is the taxation without representation thing, and the other idea that what Jerry was talking about is the water issue, because that's going to be bigger and bigger all the time as the problem of the areas closer to the city that we have problems with pollution and stuff down the road further too. Just coming up with a number, an answer, like, I guess that's the simplest thing, because the reason you did it 22 years ago, a lot of us were here then too, was because plan was for the orderly annexation. No, that's not why you did it? It was just a money grab then too?
John Perino
Well,
can-
the conversation
Mayor
was,
Perino could answer
was
that
beyond
question
that.
for
I
you.
know Perino isn't gonna answer that, he's not here.
That's what a lot of people think it is.
And that's exactly what they do think it is, Mike, because when they don't have a say, and they don't, other than just paying, that's a difficult task.
But there's a lot more than that. For example, the safety of all our firefighters, so that they know if they're fighting a fire in Alexandria in that area, that building is built to code and it's been inspected so that it will be safe. And that was, I think, in my conversations with John Freno, that was kind of one of the main things, and it was Dan Ness's interesting thing. It wasn't a money grab. It was also in the process of annexation. When we annexed buildings and garages, we annexed in a lot of, because I sat on that committee, a lot of buildings that were, I don't want to say substandard, but maybe that's the right word. They would not have met our code. And the buildings were not placed accordingly, and we had a lot of disputes that had to be fought out. And so that's how that, kept on, so that we said, we don't want buildings in our area that are tough. And there was a lot of disagreement, and how do you get these annexed in when they wouldn't meet our code, and all of those kinds of things. Go ahead, Todd.
What I don't understand is if this had nothing to do with annexation, and if this is purely a safety issue, then to go to what Jerry said, why has the 2 mile radius not stayed consistent with city limits? Why is it 2 miles in some area and 0 in other areas? If it was truly a safety concern and we have the ability to go 2 miles, then one would naturally think that we would have maintained it at 2 miles regardless of where city limits was. I think that's what's hard for people to understand.
Yep.
Sure.
Right.
Go ahead, Mikey.
I'll just say that the state law regarding the extension of the code enforcement area changed in the early 2000s. It required the township authorization for the city to extend that. And so in our conversations with those town board, either town board members or township clerks, it appeared like that was probably not going to happen. Interestingly enough, Alexandria Township did adopt does enforce the building code in the entire Alexandria Township area, so well beyond what used to be the 2 mile radius. That was their choice.
Madam Chair, I guess going back to Todd here, I mean, when you have dwellings on buildings, I mean, it's based on the, how fast fire departments can get to them, isn't that correct? I mean, that's where you base it, so I mean, when you put insurance on a building, you kind of determine right then and there what the situation is. That's how I've always seen it.
And it is.
Yeah.
And
It is.
Yep.
when you talk about the buildings not being safe because they weren't built in the city, that's a little bit unfair to
I
most
didn't say,
contractors.
I didn't
Yeah, you
say
did.
that. No, I did not say that. I didn't say anything like that. I said,
I think you
I
did.
said there were buildings that are built.
But
that
there's
aren't
buildings in the city that
aren't-
that do not conform to the
that
building
aren't
code right
inspected.
now. Just like the ones that burned, I don't think there were sprinklers in all of them.
Yeah, I have to agree with Todd on,
Yeah.
I can't buy off on the fire side of it, because then we're saying
Yeah.
the fire's gonna respond. No,
You
we're
guys
safe
own the
if we're-
fire department and you can rent it.
But
You
we know we're
guys
safe if
rent
we
it
go
out
out 2
anyway.
miles, but we know we're unsafe if we go 2.1 miles.
Yeah.
Annexation side, it makes sense, because that land would eventually be put into the city, and this would control those buildings. So I can understand it from that side of it. But it's like we're
It's
saying here,
changed,
it's no
yeah.
longer, we've got a 2 mile radius on one side, and the other side, we have nothing,
Mhm.
basically now.
That's true.
But I guess for me, the crux of the issue is if that's the law of the land, doesn't matter what your political border is, why is it not enforced outside the Alexandria city limits? Why are buildings not inspected?
I think let's be honest about that. I think part of that's a financial issue, right? I mean, you guys would have to set up a whole inspection process, and you'd have
Where
to.
is Mr. Rush running around here?
I
He's
am.
right
He's
beside
hiding
you.
behind you.
So he does a land use thing. Why do we not? Well, like Alec Township does their own, and they hire the city to do the inspections, if I remember right.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think the answer to that question is that when a jurisdiction, they don't adopt the code, they adopt enforcement of the code.
Yep.
The code exists, as Mike explained, all licensed contractors and builders have to abide by that code. And we report to the Department of Labor and Industry on all of the permits that we issue. So if the Department of Labor and Industry chooses to go and inspect those buildings and do enforcement action, they can do that. So a jurisdiction can take over that enforcement activity, but if they do so, they have to do so throughout their entire jurisdiction. They cannot pick and choose. And I think the fact of the matter is the county has discussed this before, and adoption of enforcement of the code throughout the county is not something that is popularly supported by the residents throughout the county, and therefore I don't think would be accepted by our commissioners. So we're sort of in a situation where we're not likely to take that over throughout the county. But yes, there is the appearance by some property owners who are in that enforcement area that they do have to come to the county. What they get from the county is what's called a land use permit. And as Mike explained,